The diner felt strangely quiet that morning, the kind of silence that hangs in the air just before something breaks it. The steady hum of the coffee machine filled the room, and the faint smell of burnt toast drifted through the space. Behind the counter stood a young woman, nervously twisting her hands in a white towel that had long ago stopped looking white. Her name was Grace Miller, 22 years old. A small-town girl with a big heart and a mind people had called slow for most of her life. Her soft blue eyes were always searching. Searching for acceptance. Searching for belonging. Searching for a place where she didn't have to apologize for being who she was. Grace had been working at the Maplewood Diner for almost 2 years now. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, wiping down tables, pouring coffee for truck drivers, smiling at strangers, and trying her best to remember every order the right way. Numbers didn't come easily to her, and sometimes her words tripped over each other when she felt nervous. But there was one thing nobody could deny. No one in that diner worked harder than Grace. Still, that morning would remind her just how harsh people could be. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for people who cannot stand up for themselves, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us continue telling stories that bring light into the world. It happened around 8:45 a.m. The bell above the door rang as a man in a sharp, expensive suit walked in. His polished shoes clicked loudly against the tiled floor. He looked completely out of place in a diner that smelled like bacon grease and maple syrup. He chose a seat by the window, snapped his fingers toward Grace, and said, "Coffee black and make it quick." Grace nodded and hurried to the counter. Her hands shook slightly as she poured the coffee, careful not to spill a drop. She placed the cup in front of him and gave a shy smile. The man stared at the cup, then looked up at her with clear disgust. "Are you serious?" he scoffed. "You call this clean? Look at this cup. It's straw." He pushed it back toward her. Grace blinked, her heart pounding. She had just cleaned that cup moments ago. I'm sorry, sir. I'll get you another," she stammered. The man rolled his eyes. "You should be sorry. God, this is why they shouldn't hire people who can't even do basic work. What, are you stupid or something?" The word struck her like a slap. Grace froze. Her breath caught in her throat. A few customers turned their heads. Someone whispered quietly. Grace wished she could disappear. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. She picked up the cup with shaking hands and turned back toward the counter. In the shiny chrome of the coffee pot she saw her reflection staring back, red eyes, trembling lips, and a face trying hard not to fall apart. At that exact moment, a man sitting 2 booths away slowly set down his mug. He had been watching everything since the stranger walked in. His name was Ethan Cooper, a 35-year-old single father who worked as a mechanic in town. Sitting across from him was his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, a cheerful girl with auburn hair and playful eyes. They came to the diner every Saturday morning for pancakes and chocolate milk. Grace always treated Lily kindly. She folded napkins into little animals for her, slipped an extra strawberry onto her plate, and always remembered that Lily liked her syrup warmed. Ethan had seen that expression on Grace's face before. It was the same look his late wife used to have when people called her dumb because of her dyslexia. Slowly, Ethan stood up. He walked toward the counter and spoke in a calm but steady voice. "Excuse me." The man in the suit barely looked up. Ethan continued quietly. "She's smarter than all of us." The man frowned, clearly confused. Ethan's voice grew stronger. "You just judge someone who works hard every single day. And I guarantee you couldn't last 1 hour doing what she does." He nodded toward Grace. "Grace remembers every regular customer's order without writing it down. She knows who's diabetic, who lost their job, and which kid needs an extra pancake." He paused. "That's not stupidity. That's heart. That's a kind of intelligence you may never understand." The diner became completely silent. Grace stood frozen, her eyes wide, still holding the cup. The man in the suit muttered something under his breath, stood up, and walked out. He didn't even finish his coffee. As the door closed behind him, quiet whispers spread across the diner. One of the older regulars clapped softly. Then another. Soon everyone in the diner was clapping. Grace blinked quickly, trying to hold back her tears. Ethan turned toward her and smiled gently. "Don't let people like that decide who you are," he said quietly. Lily looked up at Grace and grinned. "Daddy's right, Miss Grace. You make the best pancakes in the whole world that day." Something deep inside Grace shifted in that moment. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Later that afternoon, after the lunch rush faded away, Grace sat alone near the window watching the leaves fall outside. Ethan and Lily had already gone home, but his words kept repeating in her mind. "She's smarter than all of us." Grace didn't feel smart. School had always been painful for her. Numbers floated around in her head, letters mixed themselves up, and teachers often sighed whenever she asked questions. They called her slow. They called her special. They called her different. Grace's mother had worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, so college was never really possible. For a long time, Grace believed her whole life started and ended inside that small diner. She thought that was all there would ever be. But Ethan's words that day planted something deep inside her. For the first time, she felt a small spark of worth growing. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Lily began visiting the diner more often, not just on Saturdays. Ethan always chose a booth in Grace's section. He would ask how her day was going, and sometimes he brought small tools or simple kitchen gadgets from his workshop to make her work easier. He also noticed something most people ignored. Grace always carried a small notebook. Every order went into it carefully. Every name. Every detail. Every allergy. One evening, when the diner was almost empty and the dinner rush had passed, Ethan watched quietly as Grace handled the cash register. She counted the bills, checked the numbers, and balanced everything perfectly. Her hands were steady. Her focus was sharp. In that moment, Ethan understood something clearly. Grace wasn't slow. She simply thought about the world in a different way. A few days later, Ethan came into the diner holding a book. It wasn't a novel. It wasn't a cookbook either. It was a beginner's guide to small business management. Grace looked at the book, confused. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked. Ethan gave a small smile. "Because I believe you could run this place better than anyone." Grace laughed nervously and shook her head. "I can't even." Her words faded before she could finish. But Ethan gently cut her off. "You can't," he said firmly. "I see it every day in the way you treat people." He leaned forward slightly. "You don't just serve food, Grace. You give people comfort. And that's what real business is about. Heart." That night, Grace took the book home. Her hands trembled as she opened it, but something inside her refused to back down. So she started reading. Slowly. Carefully. Page by page. It took her 2 weeks just to finish the first chapter. But she didn't quit. She learned about budgeting, customer service, and something called community branding. One night she stayed awake until 2 a.m., sketching ideas on pieces of paper for how the diner could bring in more customers. She even designed a brand new menu using colored markers. One of her ideas stood out the most. She suggested something called a weekly kindness breakfast. Anyone who was struggling could come in and get a free meal. No questions asked? The owner of the diner, an older man named Mr. Henson, wasn't sure about the idea at first. He crossed his arms and looked doubtful. But the morning they tried the first kindness breakfast, every seat in the diner filled up. People came from all over town. That was the moment Mr. Henson realized Grace's ideas actually worked. Within just a few months, the Maplewood Diner became the center of the whole town. People didn't only come for pancakes anymore. They came because they felt welcome there. Grace slowly became the heart of the place. The same girl who once struggled to speak now trained new employees with confidence. Every morning she wrote the daily specials on the board and greeted every customer like an old friend. Then one morning, almost a year after the day someone called her stupid, something unexpected happened. The bell above the diner door rang. Grace looked up. Her heart skipped. The man in the expensive suit had just walked in again. For a second, the memory flashed through her mind. But this time she didn't freeze. She had changed. Her hair was neatly tied back. A name badge on her uniform read Shift Manager. There was a calm confidence in the way she stood. The man didn't recognize her right away. He sat down and ordered the same thing as before. Coffee black. Grace brought the cup to his table. When she set it down in front of him, he paused and looked at her. You new here? He asked casually. Grace gave a calm smile. No, sir. I've been here a while. The man slowly looked around the diner. It was full of laughter, music, and warm conversation. This place has changed, he muttered. Grace nodded slightly. Yes, sir. People can change, too. Then she turned and walked away without saying another word. A few minutes later, Ethan and Lily walked through the door. From his booth, Ethan had seen the entire moment. He watched Grace pass by and leaned toward her with a proud smile. Told you. Smarter than all of us. Grace felt tears fill her eyes again. But this time they weren't from hurt. They came from realizing how far she had come. In that moment, Grace understood something important. True intelligence isn't measured by grades or perfect words. It's shown through strength, kindness, and the courage to keep going when the world tries to push you down. Later that year, the diner received a community award for kindness in business. Not long after that, Mr. Henson decided it was time to retire. He handed the keys of the diner to Grace. At the town hall ceremony, Grace stood on a small stage holding the award plaque with shaking hands. She looked out at the crowd gathered in front of her. Right in the front row sat Ethan and Lily, clapping with the biggest smiles in the room. Grace took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. People used to call me stupid, she said. But if caring about people, believing in second chances, and never giving up means being stupid, then I'm proud of it. The entire room burst into applause. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue spreading kindness and hope. And we have a special request. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever been judged unfairly, only to prove people wrong later? We would love to hear your story. As Grace looked around at her little town that evening, she realized something powerful. The world doesn't need perfect people. It needs people who keep trying. People who keep caring. People who believe that kindness can still change lives. Because in the end, Grace was never stupid. She was extraordinary.